American pickup trucks and SUVs have a pedestrian fatality problem that most buyers never think about. When a pedestrian is hit by a standard passenger car, they typically roll onto the hood. It's not pleasant, but survival rates are relatively high. When someone is hit by a modern American pickup truck, they're far more likely to be knocked backward onto the pavement or pulled under the vehicle entirely. The difference in outcomes is significant. Research shows that pedestrians are 44% more likely to die when struck by an SUV or light truck compared to a passenger car. For children, that number jumps to 82%, and for kids under 10 years old, the fatality rate is 130% higher. A 2023 Belgian study found that pedestrians or cyclists hit by pickup trucks face almost 200% higher risk of fatal injury compared to standard cars. These aren't marginal differences. We're talking about design choices in American vehicles that have measurably increased fatalities. Meanwhile, European safety regulations have driven vehicle design in a completely different direction, and the results speak for themselves. Today we're looking at why U.S. trucks have become so much more dangerous, what Europe does differently, and whether American regulations are finally starting to catch up. The most visible difference between American and European vehicles is the front-end design, and this is where the safety gap becomes obvious. American trucks and SUVs have increasingly adopted tall, vertical, flat front ends. This design choice is purely aesthetic. Manufacturers market these vehicles with aggressive styling that conveys power and dominance. The problem is that this vertical front end creates what's called a high leading edge. When a pedestrian is struck, the impact point is at chest or head level rather than at the legs. This means the person's upper body absorbs the initial impact and they're thrown backward or under the vehicle instead of rolling up onto the hood. European vehicles, by contrast, tend to have sloped front ends with lower leading edges. This design isn't just aesthetic preference, it's driven by Euro NCAP pedestrian safety testing that specifically evaluates how a vehicle's front end interacts with a human body during impact. Vehicles with high, flat front ends lose points in their safety ratings. As a result, European manufacturers design vehicles that direct pedestrian impacts towards the hood rather than causing direct torso or head strikes. The hood height itself matters too. Modern American trucks have hoods that sit at 5 feet or higher. A 2021 study by the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety found that vehicles with hood heights above 40 inches are about 45% more likely to cause pedestrian deaths than vehicles with lower hood heights. For reference, a typical sedan has a hood height around 25 to 30 inches. European regulations don't explicitly ban tall hoods, but the pedestrian safety testing requirements create strong incentives to keep hood heights lower. If a manufacturer wants a 5-star Euro NCAP rating, which is crucial for marketing and fleet sales in Europe, they need to design vehicles that score well on pedestrian impact tests. That means lower, sloped front ends become a competitive necessity rather than a regulatory mandate. The effect is cumulative. As American trucks and SUVs have grown taller and more vertical over the past 2 decades, pedestrian fatalities have climbed steadily. U.S. pedestrian deaths increased 80% between 2010 and 2023. During that same period, European pedestrian deaths dropped 37%. The high front end creates another critical safety problem: massive blind spots that make it nearly impossible for drivers to see what's directly in front of their vehicle. A 2021 investigation by NBC News demonstrated this dramatically. They lined up 9 children sitting cross-legged in front of a Chevrolet Tahoe. The driver, seated normally in the vehicle, could not see any of them, not one. The children were completely invisible within the truck's front blind zone, which extended more than 15 feet in front of the bumper. This isn't a Chevrolet-specific problem. Tests of the Ford F-150, Ram 1500, and GMC Sierra showed similar results. Some trucks have front blind zones extending 18 to 20 feet. For context, a typical parking space is about 18 feet long. A driver in one of these trucks literally cannot see a small child standing in an entire parking space length in front of their vehicle. The result has been a steep increase in what safety researchers call front-over and back-over incidents. These are crashes where a vehicle moving at very low speeds, often in a driveway or parking lot, strikes someone the driver simply could not see. According to data from Kids and Cars, a safety advocacy organization, an average of 50 children are killed this way every week in the United States. Many of these incidents involve parents running over their own children in residential driveways. European vehicles have visibility problems too, but they're not as severe. The lower hood heights and sloped front ends reduce the size of the front blind zone significantly. A typical European hatchback or crossover has a front blind zone of maybe 6 to 8 feet. Still not ideal, but considerably safer than the 15 to 20-foot blind zones common in American trucks. The U.S. did implement a rear visibility requirement in 2018 that mandates backup cameras on all new vehicles. This has helped reduce backover incidents somewhat, but there's no equivalent mandate for front visibility. Some manufacturers offer front-facing cameras as optional equipment, but they're not required, and adoption rates remain low outside of luxury vehicles. European regulations approach this differently through the Euro NCAP Direct Vision testing protocol. This evaluates how well a driver can see their surroundings through direct line of sight without relying on cameras or sensors. Vehicles that require extensive camera systems to compensate for poor visibility lose points in their safety ratings. This creates market pressure for better inherent visibility rather than technological band-aids. The safety problems aren't limited to pedestrians. The increasing size and weight of American trucks creates what safety researchers call a crash incompatibility problem with standard passenger cars. The average weight of an American pickup truck has increased by roughly 1,500 pounds over the past 20 years. The current generation Ford F-150 weighs between 4,500 and 5,500 pounds, depending on configuration. The Ram 1500 TRX, a performance variant, weighs over 6,800 pounds. For comparison, a Honda Accord weighs around 3,200 pounds. In a collision between vehicles of vastly different weights, the physics are straightforward. The heavier vehicle transfers more energy into the lighter vehicle, and occupants of the lighter vehicle experience more severe impacts. A 2020 study published in the Journal of Safety Research found that occupants of a passenger car struck by a pickup truck or SUV are twice as likely to die compared to a car-on-car collision at the same speed. The frame structure compounds this problem. American trucks use body-on-frame construction with stiff ladder frames designed to handle towing and payload. In a crash, these rigid frames don't absorb energy efficiently. Instead, they transfer that energy directly into the other vehicle. Passenger cars use unibody construction with crumple zones specifically designed to absorb crash energy and protect occupants. When a stiff truck frame hits a unibody car, the car's crumple zones are overwhelmed. European regulations address this through Euro NCAP Mobile Progressive Deformable Barrier Test, introduced in 2020. This test doesn't just measure how well a vehicle protects its own occupants, it measures how much damage the vehicle causes to the simulated vehicle it strikes. If a vehicle is found to be disproportionately dangerous to other vehicles in a crash, it loses points on its safety rating. This creates an incentive for manufacturers to design vehicles that share crash energy more equitably, rather than simply making their own vehicle as stiff and heavy as possible. The result is that European vehicles, even larger ones, tend to have more sophisticated front-end structures that manage crash energy better. They're engineered to protect their own occupants while minimizing the damage they cause to others. American trucks are primarily engineered to protect their own occupants, with little consideration for crash compatibility with smaller vehicles.
This has created what some researchers call a safety arms race. As trucks and SUVs become heavier and more dangerous, buyers in passenger cars feel less safe and switch to larger vehicles themselves. This drives overall fleet weight upward, increases crash severity across the board, and makes roads less safe for everyone, particularly for vulnerable road users like pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists who can't participate in the arms race.